Hey everyone, it's time to kick off another exciting session of our DevOps office hours. It is August 16th, 2023. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be your host. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. Cloud Posse helps teams conquer AWS using our rock-solid Terraform blueprints. Whether you're starting from scratch or just not satisfied with your current setup, book a session with me directly by going to cloudposse.com/quiz, answer a few quick questions, and we'll have a call to show you exactly how your team will succeed. For those of you new to the call, our format's very informal. My goal is to answer your questions. If you're curious about Cloud Posse or any of our open source tools or modules, this is a great place to ask. For those joining through our podcast or YouTube channel, we host these calls every week, so you can't miss out. Register these for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. Our call today is recorded. We'll post a recording of this session to our YouTube channel. So if you want to help and support what we do over here, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps us out a great deal. So just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse. Again, youtube.com/cloudposse. If you find today's session interesting, that's a great place to find this recording and share it with your team. So let's dive right in today. We have some minor announcements and then the elephant in the room we want to talk about, which affects a lot of the people here, the move by HashiCorp to switch to the BSL license. But first, one thing, Amazon has announced an improved experience for startups. There are a lot of programs. If you are a startup operating on AWS, you've probably already heard about AWS Activate, but you might not have heard about a slew of other programs that Amazon offers, specifically targeting startups. Amazon is incredibly bullish on startups and sees their future aligned with startups. So if you're a startup, this is a great place to ask or check out some of the resources. Also reach out to your AWS account rep who can help you navigate some of the Amazon funding programs based on the stage of your startup. All right. Next announcement is just a small minor one, caught our attention. We're using this in a current engagement. We needed a way to easily replicate a slew of Docker images between a legacy Docker Hub, private repository, and ECR, copying over all the metadata and tags. There's a tool written in Go that makes that very easy called Scopio, and you can use that to just pick up all those images. It's also reentrant, so it can keep syncing where it left off. So you can put this like in a GitHub cron job that just GitHub Action cron job that just syncs it regularly. Matt, anything you'd like to add?
We'll actually be releasing a GitHub Action that uses this under the covers a little bit later today. I've just finished up the pull request and just needed to be reviewed. So yeah. Cool. So the other cool thing about it would be that you can also specify specific architectures that you want to sync. So if you only want to sync, say, like Linux, whatever ARM architecture to a local repository, that's pretty easy to do. It's a pretty cool little tool.
All right. Cool. Well, then without further ado, let's go to the special edition portion of our office hours today. Just in case everyone's not coming from this from the same level of obsession and following LinkedIn as much as I have over the past couple months, week rather. HashiCorp announced last week a pretty significant change. So they are not retroactively, but moving forward from Terraform releases of 1.5.5 and well, sorry, not from 1.5.5, but from 1.5.5 onwards, the license switches to a business source license, and it is no longer technically open source. It is source provided. This has impacts depending on how you use Terraform, and there's a both an announcement by HashiCorp of the initial release that we'll share if you haven't seen it, but also a lengthy FAQ that is evolving by the day, by the hour, on what the implications are for you. So I think we're going to get some input here from some of the vendors that have been largely affected by this. But it's not just if you're a vendor building products on top of Terraform, there is a larger aspect of this that affects the overall uncertainty of Terraform moving forward for new companies adopting it, what it means for current companies building solutions around Terraform like Cloud Posse. They've addressed a lot of these in the FAQ, so definitely check that out. But I think it'd be great to hear from some of the vendors here who've been behind the scenes building out the initiative, to hear from them. Matt, you were going to say something?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things, I guess, to say. One, I think we're all going to talk a lot about license terms and usage and what's granted and FAQs and all that. I think it would probably be irresponsible not to say, well, maybe some of us on this call are attorneys, but certainly Eric and I and maybe others are not attorneys. And what we're talking about is not should not be constituted as any kind of legal advice, but more just our opinions on what we know and what we've read and those kinds of things. And I think that secondly, while they've written a bunch of things in FAQs, what really kind of bugs me about it is that the license is the license, and that's the thing that grants you that grants you or prevents you from doing things. And if they haven't necessarily updated the actual license, the FAQ is just fodder as to sort of interpretation of what the license says. So the terms of the actual license are the things, and I was going to actually point this out. I'm glad you opened it up. The last sentence of the first paragraph is the thing that I really think I really think that this is, even for people who are not building tools and everything on top of it, this is the most concerning part to me, is that the licensor may make additional use grants above permitting limited production use. So basically this is saying that you can use Terraform, but some ambiguous, like if you're using it for production use, you may have to pay HashiCorp something to do that, or you may have to use one of their commercial products, or ... I mean, the problem is that it's not specified here and it's ambiguous, and at some point in the future they can come along and change what that means pretty easily. And people who have built businesses around this are rightly worried and confused by the whole thing. So that's my quick take, on all of this.
Yeah, what I don't understand behind all of this is, like, this is the FAQ. I understand this. This is not legalese. This kind of puts me at rest in some ways. But reading this is shouldn't all of this be evident from reading the license? Like, this is just helping us interpret the license, and none of this is almost none of this is evident by just reading the terms here. So to me, they should just make the FAQ the license at this point, because it doesn't seem like it's a BSL.
Yeah. Also, just for, if you want to get really technical in the whole thing, if you look at the SPDX, like the spdx.org and all the licenses,
okay,
this thing is actually the identifier for this is actually the BUSL, because the BSL is actually like a different license. So I'm not exactly sure why they chose to do that. So yeah, so the BSL, I forget if you go to that, is some other license that isn't this. So it's spdx.org. That's the thing that actually like aggregates all the license lists or whatever. Yeah. And if you search for BSL, it's like a different license. Yeah, the Boost software license. And this is actually the BUSL, which is the business use something license, source license or whatever. So I don't know, but I just found that interesting that they were using the wrong abbreviation for what it's, or a confusing abbreviation. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. MariaDB refers to it as BSL. I guess because they're trying to create a canonical source, they had to come up with their own identifier.
Yeah.
So I guess there's, yeah.
So this is like,
All right. Well,
these are the identifiers that things like, package.json and like others that use the canonical names to determine which licenses it actually applies to. This is like the version that they use for it. So that's where I always consider this like the
okay.
canonical truth of what it should be called. But anyway,
Well, I'd
I'll
like to
shut
hear
up now.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from some of our special guests today joining us. We have Igor from Digger.dev. We have Jean-Marc Fontaine from Spacelift, Corey Daniel also from Digger HQ, or no, sorry.
Mass Driver.
Mass Driver, that's what it was. Sorry, my fault. I'd love to have your guys' input on all of this and what you've been doing behind the scenes, whatever you can share around OpenTF. Actually, I guess maybe I should announce some of the other things that have happened with this. There is, if everyone hasn't seen, there is now an initiative to do something about this called OpenTF. It hasn't been decided if it's a foundation. It hasn't been decided that there's any fork. It's just that something needs to happen. And the best possible outcome is that HashiCorp just reverses course on this, mea culpa, and moves on. But there needs to be some alternative path to this, and that's where the foundation approach goes. It's also ideally not going to be its own foundation. I mean, the best possible outcome would be a massive, well-recognized, well-funded foundation takes this project over, but we don't know yet what's going to happen there. Igor?
Yeah, so not much to publicly announce beyond what's stated. Maybe a bit of a first thing to say, it's a community effort, right? Like that's an effort primarily driven by companies building product that might be affected, or we're worried that are affected. But we also have people from Spacelift here and Mass Driver, and we're all, building competing products. But on this one thing, we agree quite strongly. So that Terraform needs to be open. Then again, you might have heard about the fork under Digger org. That's no longer live. We're fully behind this effort, and we are hoping, as you say, sincerely, that a fork will not be needed, and HashiCorp actually does the sensible thing, as stated in the manifesto, because everyone will benefit. We believe even HashiCorp in the long term, but that remains to be seen. So with that out of the way, I guess we're stating what OpenTF is. It's an initiative that started almost as a kind of panic response to this unexpected move by HashiCorp. Everyone was trying to kind of coordinate something on Friday after that. And then over the weekend, it came together as a manifesto, which you see now have lots and lots of companies sign under it, and individuals as well. We're hoping for this effort to actually, push HashiCorp towards reconsidering. Companies at the top listed, we're all founding members of this. And whether or not there will be a fork will be obviously decided by HashiCorp's response, if there's any, but the world does need a truly open source Terraform. And I guess one last thing to state before I hand over for additional context to Jean-Paul is that a change in licensing for Terraform specifically is quite unprecedented, and there's one technical reason that actually means a lot. It makes a big difference compared to other products. They're referring in their announcement to like MongoDB and Elastic, and they also have Vault and Console affected by the change, obviously. One thing that is omitted from this is that Terraform happens to be a language rather than a backend service that you can self-host or perhaps rent for money. You could make money off MongoDB's code and make a managed MongoDB offering just like Atlas, right? Terraform is a language, it's a CLI, right? And the server side of it by HashiCorp, called Terraform Cloud, Terraform Enterprise, that was never open source in the first place, was it? So that's the most puzzling part of this move, and that's why the reaction from the community was so quick. It doesn't look anything close to fair or community friendly or anything like that. I guess, yeah, Jean-Marc, maybe you'll add more context.
I agree with you that is what is surprising to me as well. I completely agree with what you just said. To me, what the Terraform CLI, which I call the foundation layer, should be open, should not be linked to any commercial entity, so that people can build things on top of that at the orchestration layer, where we all compete, Digger, us, and others. And I think that would be better for us in competition to have this foundational layer being owned and managed by a non-commercial entity. So I just filling up for Martin at the last minute, so I'm not involved in everything, so bear with me here. One thing that was said earlier that I found interesting, that this FAQ is really, really long. When your FAQ is multiple times the length of your license, probably there is something wrong, especially because you can explain everything you want in the FAQ. That's not legally binding. So even if you're super nice and granting a lot of things in the FAQ, at the end of the day, if you go to court, only the license will apply. And that is a problem. The license needs to be clarified because there are too much room for interpretation there. So last thing I'd like to mention is that we are behind OpenTF. We support that. We are working with others on that, and I think that's a great initiative, and that shows that the community can come together and do the right thing for Terraform, for the project that we all love.
Thanks, John. Corey, do you want to add your side of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting, right? I mean, this is a tool that I've used for a very long time. And one of the things that's really funny about Massdriver getting caught up in this is, I think that we sell to a very different audience than who HashiCorp sells to, right? So, I mean, if you look at the Stack Overflow surveys from each year and Gartner surveys, like, reality is like less than 8% of software engineers have cloud operations expertise, right? So that's who HashiCorp's selling to, right? They're selling an operations tool to people. Who we're selling to is we're trying to make effectively a PaaS that you have full control over. And so the idea was there was a bunch of these components in there. And this is for the 92% of engineers that need to get shit done. Sorry, I didn't ask if I could say that. I cussed a lot. I apologize. Sorry for the content warning. But like for those people that need to get stuff done, but they're not necessarily concerned with cloud operations, right? And the reality is, like, as a cloud operations engineer, I've been doing data center work, and then I migrated a huge data center to AWS when they first launched EC2, right? I've been an ops engineer for a long time, but the reality is, like, for most companies, like, ops isn't something that moves business KPIs, right? At the end of the day, software developers and their product managers are pushed to release software quickly. I need to sell more shirts. I need to do more of the thing, and cloud operations falls by the wayside. Like, my belief is that DevOps has failed. I'm the guy that wrote that article a few weeks back that everyone freaked out about. And I want those engineers that aren't as concerned with ops to still have that great ops posture and security posture and compliance by default. And so when we came up with Massdriver and started doing the development, like, we've always been IAC agnostic, but we're Terraform users, and we build a lot of these secure, compliant Terraform modules, very similar to the work that Cloud Posse does, for our customers, so they can get started with something. But the catch is, if they want to extend the platform with Helm or Pulumi or just even Bash scripts, like, we act very much like GitHub Actions at that point in time. We'll run a container to do any provisioning you want. And so while we sell to a very different audience, like, we're kind of caught up in this, like, will we be considered a competitor tomorrow? And the way that this is written, it's not just anti-community, it is anti-competitive. And I'd argue and I'd argue this a lot more if I was a much bigger company, that it borders on antitrust, right? As Igor said, they're taking a language away from a community that was built by a community and that people have built on top of. It's gone against the Tao of HashiCorp, if you watch the videos about how they talk about it. And so I feel like they've really turned their back on the community, which, you know, we've seen happen time and time again as companies, you know, cross that threshold into IPO land. So, you know, today our lawyers are like, yeah, you're fine, but like, I want to make sure that this language is something that is available to people. Like, there are other great tools out there, starting to see Pulumi and some of the stuff from Crossplane. Like, there are other interesting ISC solutions, you know, system init, open source their software this morning or last night, but Terraform's become ubiquitous. It's here, it's going to be here for a long time, even if something else becomes the new thing, whether it's Pulumi or whatnot. Like, there's going to be enterprises and businesses running on this for the foreseeable future, and it needs to stay open. So that's my soapbox.
Thank you. Can we, well, I guess let's pause, maybe see, does anyone have any questions before we continue on the topic? Maybe trying to understand this from HashiCorp's perspective to try and make it as a little bit fair and balanced if we can.
Are you looking for someone to put forth what the HashiCorp argument is of why they would want to do this?
Well, first I was going to say, I didn't make that clear. Pausing for questions based on, anyone have any questions for Igor, Jean, Mark, or Corey?
I have not exactly a question, but I think if HashiCorp hadn't had a lowered reputation the last year about not accepting commits, this may have not been taken quite as badly. For example, MariaDB is a fairly well-respected set of software. Monty, who's the guy that made it, created MariaDB like the day after Oracle took over MySQL, right? It's how HashiCorp have used it more so that is the problem. I said BSD, it's not BSD. BSD is a great license, sorry. The BSL license isn't necessarily an awful license. It's how they're choosing to use it, their addendums. I think the biggest fault that my view that HashiCorp got themselves into is Terraform have become like core to the ecosystem, like using curl or something. So for them to go and that's how it's maybe different than Elastic screwed their license up, right? But they didn't get nearly as much flack because not many people are hacking with Elastic, like the actual code. With Terraform is the code. So anyway, that's more of a statement. I'm just curious about if we would have seen this initiative if it hadn't been for the last year where they kind of refused to accept commits that might compete with their enterprise product, for example. That's a growing concern I've seen. I mean, like there's a GitHub issue that is many years old with thousands of comments because they won't make it easier to manage backends, for example. So everybody uses Terraform. Sorry, ranting. Done.
Yeah.
I have a thought here unless somebody else wants to jump in. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just very quickly to go back to Igor's point. I think that for Vault, it makes total sense. If you can take Vault, just host it and become a competitor overnight by doing very little, I can get it why that's annoying to them. But for Terraform, it's a whole different thing. That's a language, that's an interpreter for the language. We are not competing with Terraform. We are competing with another solution that is not open source. So that is a completely different thing. So I can see their point for some of their products. I cannot see the point for Terraform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe to add to that, it's spot on. As in, it does make sense. Back to the question raised, I guess, did HashiCorp kind of provoke that by their early actions? Well, it definitely did contribute to it. Would we stay up all weekend trying to pull together an initiative just because they raised pricing and did merge some PRs? And would 10 competing companies come together to make a pledge? Well, probably not. So that was definitely a trigger point. And it's like it's in some sense there was doubt before. Did they actually kind of chose the darker side? Did they actually turn their back on the community? And some people said yes, other people said, well, company got to make money, so that there was a bit of ambiguity there, and you could give it the benefit of the doubt. Well, with this you can't anymore, and that's clear as day. So that kind of galvanized the community action.
I think that's a good segue to try and express the alternative viewpoint, right? From HashiCorp's perspective, like, here's a company, they built their back on open source. They've been an open source company. They're now publicly traded. They have to find ways to monetize their products. They own HashiCorp, they own Terraform and the other products. They have the right to change the licenses on these tools. They have been struggling to monetize some of the things, and this was a defensive move, not unsimilar, as you've mentioned, to MariaDB, MongoDB, Elasticsearch have all done varying degrees of this, of changing their license in order to protect their ability to monetize the products. How, like, why is, it's been alluded to why this is different, but what else kind of is, supporting of this move for HashiCorp from an, the devil's advocate position? Anything else that we're missing?
I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously they have to make revenue, and one of the things that, and I'm not trying to like throw a glove here, but I mean, like that we had this panic 2 years ago. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but there was this big news article about how they couldn't staff people internally to work on Terraform, right? And everybody kind of panicked 2 years ago that there wasn't going to be development here, and meanwhile, the community's trying to get stuff in, right? And on that last question, like we're actually at this point, we have something that we've been planning to open source for a while that is very integrated with Terraform that we wanted to release for Terraform that we haven't, because we're like, what's the point of releasing it if it's not going to get merged, right? And so we've been working on making it a separate project from the fork that we have internally. But I mean, they obviously have to make money, but the reality is, like, they've had a pretty massive like stock plummet over the past couple of months, and I'm not sure that even if every company in this well, I mean, the initiative's grown pretty large, but I mean, the people that originally started it, if they vanished, I don't think those customers would go to HashiCorp. Like, I know our customers wouldn't go use Terraform Cloud. They'd probably honestly go back to Heroku, right? Like, they go back to a regular pass. So I mean, my gut is, like, this is more of a my gut is this is a different play for them, and I don't think we know what that is. I don't think it's how we'll get all of Spacelift and M0's customers. I mean, even if that was the ploy, like, I mean, it's going to take quarters to convince a big organization to move, right? So I mean, that's not something that's going to immediately impact their bottom line. So I think it's a lot of conjecture at this point in time to like figure out what their motives are for this. But I mean, I feel like the fork has been like writing on the wall since that initial post in the Register 2 years ago, where they said that they couldn't staff it, and seeing some of these security PRs and really interesting functionality PRs just languish on the repo for 2 or 3 years, and valid issues sitting open for years. It's obvious that it's gotten too big for one company to control, and it even without this, I think it needed to be moved to CNCF or Linux Foundation or someplace where it can be run and managed by the community, so there's more eyes on all those BRs.
And to add to that, if you look carefully at the latest Terraform versions, a lot of the new features are actually very designed to advance the TFE and TFC agenda. A lot of them were meant to be a stepping stone for some of the commercial features. And that's not how I see helping the community, especially if that goes against prioritizing some long-standing issues that would benefit the community if they were fixed.
Yep, and to the devil's advocate point, I guess I could see it in a way from HashiCorp's kind of leadership perspective. So they kind of have 3 pillars of revenue, right? Like, one being Vault, the other console, and there's this thing, Terraform. Does it make money? Well, sort of, yes. Is it growing? Probably not, by the way, if you look at their statement. But how does it make money? By some kind of a runner for Terraform that runs Terraform, but Terraform itself doesn't. And this sort of low resolution kind of MBA grad thinking is like, can we actually make this whole thing, make money together so that there is no risk or something like that? that is unfortunate that it went this way. But yeah, as was mentioned before, there was a lot of latent demand for a fork before. It was like these little subtle things with, for example, a very vivid example of it would be the way they dealt with the backend and remote backend in Terraform, the language. Like they forced this cloud syntax that only works with Terraform Cloud, unsurprisingly. And I mean, that wasn't community interest, was it? And the grand plan seems to be visible, and it was visible from those times when, like, okay, let's make the language tightly coupled with the cloud and then stop everyone else from even using the language in commercial terms. Yeah, that's sad.
Let me bring up just another perspective from my side, being Cloud Posse, right? We produce, hundreds and hundreds of repositories that are open source. And how would I feel if some competing, Slalom Consulting comes along? Hey, yeah, we decide we're just gonna take all of your modules and create a competing offering. I probably wouldn't be too happy about that. I don't know what, our response though would have to be just to continue beating the drum in our path, because we've chosen open source as a practical way of licensing and distributing our software that gives everyone absolute clarity on how they can use our modules. So because it's Apache 2, every business can use it and have clarity on that. If I switched over Cloud Posse suddenly to a license like this, I think it would be very difficult for me to continue operating the company and having the same trust from customers and using what we have.
Yeah, I also think that it's interesting that Terraform, as well as all of the other revenue generating products at HashiCorp, actually utilize a ton of open source software themselves to make those products what they are. Like, imagine if AWS came and said, you can't use the AWS SDK within your products unless you pay us, AWS, for some of your hosting, money above and beyond what you're already paying us, or whatever, like something crazy like that. Or they changed the core crypto library license, and now Vault is no longer nearly as good as Vault is unless they pay some foundation a license to use the core crypto library. I mean, that's kind of akin to what's happening here, right? Terraform has become a de facto language, low-level building block of other products, and you're now basically saying, I'm going to license that commercially to you. Or in this case, they're not even really offering to license it commercially. They're basically just preventing you from using it, which is even worse than licensing it, I guess. I don't know. I don't particularly. I think this was not a very well thought out. I think this response was more of a panic response to HashiCorp IPOing, having financial pressures to deliver on revenues that were in forecasted business models, and which is the reason that they were able to IPO and get the initial multiples that they were. They've built an inferior, overly priced product, which is Terraform, Terraform Cloud or Terraform Enterprise, and people are competing with them. So they had a panic reaction to say, well, how can we eliminate all of our competition, rather than saying, how can we make our offering better so that more people want to buy it? They basically said, how can we prevent others from competing with us so that others have to buy the shittier solution? Sorry, I also did the Corey profanity thing here, but in my opinion, that's just poor business. It's just a bad example. Like, if you can't win on the merits of your product, then preventing others from competing just seems like cheating at the whole thing. It's just crazy.
Short-sighted.
Yeah. What's really interesting to me about the whole announcement too was they made it about we build something and some of these other companies don't give back, which is funny because it's they're the ones 2 years ago slowed down the community-driven PRs, right? And so I think that, and from what I've heard, there wasn't an outreach before this. It was a surprise to everybody that kind of joined over the weekend. But HashiCorp wasn't reaching out to these companies saying, hey, we need contributions. We're willing to make you a core contributor so that we can keep this open. So like the excuse of like, hey, we closed this down because people are taking it and building freely on top of it. Everybody, like I'm going to be honest, like Igor, like we've passed each other like over the past 2 years here and there, but like honestly, like the past 3 days of working together, like the camaraderie in this group and in this Slack channel, like everyone is having fun. People care about the community, and it almost seems like HashiCorp didn't even care enough about the community to ask. Right? They didn't care
100%.
enough to engage with anybody to see if anybody was willing to chip in. And there's already pledges from companies willing to fund full-time engineers. I mean, we're a small stage startup. We actually just raised another round, and I didn't get to announce it Monday because this happened. Like people want to contribute, and you can see M0, Spacelift, Scalar are going to be financially dedicating money to full-time engineers working, and that is more than the number of people from HashiCorp that are actively working on Terraform. Like these people want to work with HashiCorp. HashiCorp is making an excuse because they don't want to work with anybody. They want to own the thing. And so that's what really got me, is like that the ethos of that company and what they claim as their Tao like has obviously changed, and that makes sense for a big company. But like to claim you're an open source business and with a Buso license, like you're not, like, and you're not community driven anymore.
Yeah, I mean, ask Sun Microsystems how making Java like closed source for them worked out. It's kind of
or taking MySQL because the next day it's MariaDB created, and every OS default now is MariaDB, not MySQL. So
well, we had a really interesting couple of people that reached out to us that were just friends, and so they saw this happening, and they're like, we're concerned as well, and they they make products that compete with HashiCorp, but they don't use HashiCorp's tool to do that product. I'm trying to protect names here. You probably go figure it out, but they make tools that compete with HashiCorp, but they don't use HashiCorp's product to make that tool. It's a completely homegrown tool, but they do use Terraform. And so now they're in an interesting place. We use a HashiCorp tool to build our infrastructure, and then we compete with HashiCorp on something completely unrelated to any of HashiCorp's toolings. Can we use Terraform to provision our infrastructure now? Or did we just put a massive debt burden on our operations team? And like that's the ambiguity that people are sitting in. So even companies that are thinking, oh, this doesn't affect us, it's like, okay, well, I mean, maybe it does, right? Like that's the problem with this license, is they have a license, which we're used to as software developers opening up a Git repo, reading the license and being like, oh, this is the rules and regulations, except for there's also this FAQ page that can just be updated at any point in time and can continually be appended on. So I think that's the thing that's really scary for other orgs, is like, that they're thinking, do I need to move off Terraform altogether? Do I need to move to Pulumi? Do I need to move to God knows, hopefully I don't go to Ansible, but to some of the other tooling out there. Sorry if there's Ansible fans, but at me.
Although presumably legacy Pulumi has the same problem, right? Their V1, like AWS providers, et cetera, are all based on top of Terraform providers that are doing things. So
the providers did stay Mozilla. So providers and HCL stayed Mozilla for now, as I've seen quoted a few times.
That's exactly. So
there's also a bright side to all this. Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I was just going to chime in there. Like, you brought up an interesting example, and I don't, this is the ambiguity with the license, right? It's not clear and it's not stated in the license, but it is stated in the FAQ. So can you build a competing product with HashiCorp using Terraform? You can, so provided that it's not running Terraform as the product, I guess, is what they're trying to say. But again, that's just an out carved in this FAQ that is not legally binding, like, previously mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, like, this list keeps growing, right? So like this number 26 one, like, we questioned this with our legal team, and our legal team determined that we are fine through a number of different paths that this can break down. But then this 26 landed, and like, we're good now, right? So Like it's funny. It's like there's 27 exclusions on here so far, plus all the licensing exclusions they've made. So I'll be curious. It'll be fun when this hits 1,337. I think that's the goal.
When is 26 in effect?
Yeah, what's the start date?
Is it in effect as of the date that they changed licenses? Because presumably everyone on this call already has a competitive product in production, with them that would not be considered a violation of the BSL. But does that only start if you built something that was in compliance after the BSL? Like, I don't know. It's like very strange.
So I'd like to cut over just to address chatter in the channel. Like Sean posts, that the pressure is definitely financial. It's also possible there was competitive pressure from AWS, unless AWS have made a deal to pay them behind the scenes.
It's happened many times before. That's happened many times before, where they make a deal and then they're okay, they get some money. I mean, my employer had deals with various different cloud providers previously. So, but
which is what's so interesting about this announcement is a partnership on the same exact day that the BSL.
I was just guessing, so maybe I was right.
Well, yeah. So this is related to HashiCorp and Terraform Cloud, and my guess is this was in tight collaboration with them, which is also why I would suspect that maybe there hasn't been any talk about specifically AWS's legal exposure position on Proton. But maybe for the same reason that a lot of the taco providers also see that they, even though I think the license change was clearly trying to target them, there's a lot of loopholes or ways that it's leaking like a sieve. It seems like maybe that's the same thing that AWS is relying on to not take sides as it relates to AWS Proton.
They did take sides on Elastic with OpenSearch, and in that case, they kind of won because other people joined. I think they made an Apache license, and other companies like Red Hat and others did join in them with OpenSearch. So Amazon have a few times chosen the more open path, so we might get lucky if they do.
Right. I mean, I think that's kind of the hope here is that if the hand is forced on OpenTF, then maybe a big benefactor like that comes along.
Yeah. What's interesting to me, I think we've alluded to it a little bit here, but maybe this is a controversial opinion, maybe not, but I think the project might be better off if OpenTF went forward, irrespective of what HashiCorp decided to do. Like, it seems like having a more community managed product that is funded at a resource level significantly higher than HashiCorp is funding it at today might actually be the better long-term solution, even though it's scary because it's unknown right now. But yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it's beneficial to HashiCorp too. I mean, then they can focus specifically on competing with their core product and not be held back by developing Terraform as well, accelerating PR goals and everything else.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Eric. I think that you spend a lot more time focusing on TFE, right? I mean, the other thing that's interesting here is as far as I feel like as far as the group, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I mean, I think we all agree, but at the same time, we don't want to see a fracture in community. That's the really funny thing here is they've pushed on this, nobody cares about the community, nobody's giving back, but that is why we wrote this letter. We want there to be a community. We don't want a Series A CTO startup or startup CTO trying to decide which tool to use. He's got a million other things to worry about, and now he wants to start getting good operational posture. Now he has to choose between these two products. We don't want people to have to worry about that. So I mean, I think it would be better off in the hands of the community. I personally want HashiCorp to be involved. I don't want to see a fracturing there and see the sprawl. I mean, the CNCF is doing research right now on what the impact is of this, and the amount of tools that depend on Terraform is substantial, right? And so there is going to be community impact outside of direct Terraform users, which I think is who needs to be protected in this, because we do not want to see a big fallout and affecting businesses everywhere with this decision.
I think one of the things that we haven't talked about are maybe some of the negatives of if this does happen. going back to trying to address all sides. I mean, it will split the community, split resources, create confusion. Which version should we use? Create uncertainty for new adopters of Terraform, possibly reduce interest from startups, enterprises adopting this tool because they see risk as a result of these changes, and that the community is fractured, which affects everyone here. Like, that's not a good thing. Like, I don't want people questioning whether or not to use Terraform and going, nah, screw it, we're just going to go CDK or Pulumi or something. We built a whole business at Cloud Posse on using Terraform. We want there to be considerable trust in what that represents, and that could be damaged temporarily by such a move like this. Anyone have more experience with like the effective kind of strategic move with what was the initial fork for Node.js from Joyent something.io?
IOJS.
That was IOJS. I was actually thinking about this one. Yeah.
Where I mean, it did have that fracturing effect, but ultimately came together and became stronger again, and to be what is known by everyone today as Node.js, as though it was always that way when it wasn't. Oh, that's interesting. Someone shared, Corey shared the link to the CNCF Foundation impact study. Any more questions about OpenTF for Igor? He has to drop soon.
I don't know. One of the things I was just going to quickly bring up is I know, not that they're like all that prevalent, but Oracle Cloud, I know when they launched, they actually, like, the canonical way to launch resources on Oracle Cloud is using Terraform. So it'd be really interesting to see, like, if they have a secrets provider that is competitive with Vault, are they now in violation and you can't use Terraform anymore to launch on Oracle Cloud, as an example. So I don't know. It's just an interesting. They may have since changed that. My Oracle Cloud knowledge is definitely dated. But when they first launched, like, pretty much the only way you could launch stuff on Oracle Cloud was using Terraform.
Yeah, I was just
that might likely be the. I mean, earlier it was mentioned, the IOJS story at OpenTF. I mean, we look closely at that story, obviously, but the Oracle story kind of similar in a sense. And there is significant will in the industry to back the initiative from players of all sizes. So I would be surprised if all cloud companies are like, yep, PSL from HashiCorp, business as usual. I'm not sure that's going to happen like that.
So one of the interesting things is this is the first collateral damage or fallout from this license change. So Terraform Cloud has drift detection, right? That is a core feature of it. Snyk has a feature of drift detection, managed resources. Is there any correlation with this, or is it coincidental? They announced that they are deprecating it as of September 30th. Is it because it was competitive and they just didn't find it worth reinventing, or was it?
If you look, that was as of 2020. That was a year ago that they announced that, I think.
Or they announced it a year ago. Okay, fair. Thank you for pointing that out. I missed that.
Oh, no, I'm reading that wrong. I think maybe that notice was added. Scroll up. Was this article?
Oh, this was added. Yeah, this was the.
You can't tell what it was added. You'd have to go to Wayback Machine archive.org.
Not the announcement. Added. This was not the announcement. This was the actual documentation page about it, or a blog post about it that was updated to mention it was deprecated. You
have to go to archive.org and see if that was added within the last week. If it was, then that's the cause. It's just very sad because driftctl was an open product. They hired the developers of it. It's an awesome tool, and then it came into the Snyk ones, Snyk ones, and they stopped developing driftctl, and now it's going to die. So,
funny enough, that engineer joined Spacelift yesterday, completely unrelated. The timing was funny.
No, I'm joking. I'm just joking. I have no idea.
I have my first PR that is an enabled flag on every resource to be turned on and off with a Boolean. That's actually my first PR to go into this when this opens up. It's ready to go for every resource in Terraform.
That would be amazing. How many wonderful PRs aren't there out there that we could get incorporated into this if there wasn't the gatekeeper we have today?
One of the ones that I don't know how we're going to release this now, but we're sponsoring reInvent this year, and the goal is to get this out and in, or at least some excitement around it before. But HashiCorp has a validation experiment right now in Terraform, and we have a full validation system for variables. So you can do regex, you can do cross variables, you can actually represent enums. We built a full validation system for Terraform that we were hoping to contribute to the project, but now we don't know where to put it. So that was kind of the thing I was mentioning earlier, that we were considering just making a third-party tool for now that you can kind of put in front of Terraform. But I mean, there's a lot of really good ones in there. I mean, even I just saw the other day there's one for encrypting state locally, right? That's a great one to have. I mean, the people with good security posture and ops posture here, we're using remote state backends, but I mean, the truth is, a lot of companies, when they get started with Terraform, their state file is local, right? And they're probably pushing it right into GitHub, right? And so giving those people a means of having security around something that may hold Postgres passwords, I think, is important. And that sitting open and languishing lowers the security posture there and puts an additional operations burden on a single person team that they shouldn't have. So I think there's a lot that could be added pretty quickly that would add substantial value to a lot of people.
Has anyone ever seen even a POC or prototype of calling HashiCorp providers without the Terraform core? Obviously, Pulumi did similar things when they called the providers directly, but with the exception of Pulumi, any other examples?
I believe that is how Crossplane originally worked as well. And I did a small experiment with it. I manage a couple of Kubernetes libraries for Elixir. So the Kubernetes client, and then I wrote a framework for extending Kubernetes with Elixir called Bonnie. And when I first started working on Bonnie, I'd also experimented with doing exactly that. So it's an RPC interface, it's a Go RPC interface. So I think if you go look through, I don't believe that Crossplane is still doing this, but I think that was how it was originally developed as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly that it stands up basically an RPC server, and you communicate with it over protobufs, to do whatever you want to do on the back end.
All right, well, we are almost out of time for today. I think we'll start to wrap things up. Thank you all the special guests for attending today on last minute notice. I'm sure we'll be talking about this some more as the days and weeks progress. Today's session is going to be available on our office hours session, or office hours, what do you call them, channel on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/cloudposse. It'll be posted there in a few hours. You can subscribe to our newsletter where we share interesting links like the things we shared today. Go to newsletter.cloudposse.com. This session and all our past sessions are available at podcast.cloudposse.com. However you listen to podcasts, it's syndicated. If you're interested in working with Cloud Posse at some point, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz. You'll book a session directly with me, and happy to see if we're fit for what you are looking to accomplish. And with that said, have a great rest of your week, and hope all this BSL stuff blows over by next time. Take care. Bye.
Okay.